Hello and good evening. Welcome. I'm Todd Steed. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a virtual celebration of writers hosted by the Friends of Literacy and the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame. We're going to honor and hear from this year's Hall of Fame inductees and be entertained by several well-known regional writers. We know this is different from our usual dinner and awards gala, and yes, you're going to have to cook for yourself this evening, and I'm sure it's going to be great. But we still have worked very hard to make this evening enjoyable and entertaining for you as you watch from the comfort of your own home. A little bit of housekeeping. In the event of emergency, please exit through the left or right of your living room. If you need to exit through your kitchen, that's fine. Just don't knock over the thawing chicken that's sitting on the edge of the oven in there, and I think we'll be okay. As with our live events in non-COVID times, all proceeds go to the Adult, Child, and Family Literacy Program at Friends of Literacy. Throughout this presentation, we'll give you the opportunity to make a donation, and we hope you will give as you are able. Right now, I want to thank our virtual event sponsors. And here they come, and we're so grateful for each and every one. Heron Connell Insurance, Knox News, KPMG, KUB, LHP Capital. Let me say that again to make sure I got it right. LHP Capital. New Millennium Writings, Pellissippi State Foundation, Ponce Metals, Union Avenue Books, I was just there, University of Tennessee Libraries, and WUOT. I was just there as well. Now, this is really kind of a special evening, and I just want you to just sit back and enjoy it, and you're in for some really special once-in-a-lifetime performances and readings. But now I want to introduce to you Teresa Britton, Friends of Literacy Executive Director, who will tell us more about the organization and its work. Here you go, Teresa. You're somewhere out there in virtual land.
Good evening. Thanks again for joining us tonight to celebrate the work of local and regional writers and the 2021 inductees into the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame. Proceeds from this event support the programs here at Friends of Literacy. For adults, we offer reading, English for speakers of other languages, and high school diploma prep. Our Reading Mentors program helps young elementary school children learn to read proficiently at grade level. And our Family Literacy program provides parents with books and other resources to help their children become better readers. You can learn more about all of our programs by visiting our website, friendsofliteracy.org, or by following us on Facebook. Last year, even with COVID, we were able to serve 181 adults, 805 children, and over 600 parents across 15 counties. We distributed almost 2,000 books. We were able to do this thanks to tremendous support from our community and the hard work of our 60 volunteers. This year, with your help, we can serve even more people. Before we hear from the writers, I want to thank members of the selection committee who carefully evaluated all the nominations we received and decided which of many talented writers would be inducted into the Hall of Fame. This year's committee members are Bess Conley, Peggy Hilliard, Jack Neely, Candy Reeves, Pamela Schoenwalt, Davis Shoulders, Todd Steed, and Kim Trevathan. And now I'll turn it back over to Todd, who will introduce the writers.
First up on tonight's writers, we have Darius Stewart, winner of the inaugural Emerging Writer Award sponsored by New Millennium Writings. Then Rita Quillen will read from her new book, Some Note You Hold, poems about finding joy and peace after grief. Sara Pirkle sings Rain on Easter to celebrate her Hall of Fame induction for songwriting, sponsored by Ponce Metals. And Liza Alther reads an excerpt from her new novel, Swan Song and Odyssey. Here we go.
Good evening. My name is Darius Stewart, and I am so honored to be here with you all virtually to accept the 2021 Emerging Writer Award. I'd like to think my interest in writing began in the 5th grade when I entered and won first place in an essay contest sponsored by the Modern Woodmen of America. I was 10 or 11 and remember feeling challenged by the contest prompt to write about how I would introduce immigrants to America, to the city of Knoxville. What in my short-lived experience could be so compelling that a foreigner to my country, to my city, would feel welcomed enough to this place to call it their home too, I thought. I had no idea at the time what a creative nonfiction essay was or looked like, but what I did recognize was that I could attempt to express myself earnestly, the very definition of essaying, and without regard to formal conventions. The blank, wide-ruled notebook paper on which I was writing provided an opportunity for anything. The rules could be what I wanted them to be as long as I made the writing captivating. Concrete images, symbolism, sensory details, a commanding voice. These were the tools foremost on my mind as I endeavored to essay, even though I had no idea if I was using these tools properly. I relied simply on an innate sensibility that surely this was how one wrote an essay about immigrants new to America, new to the city of Knoxville, Tennessee. In the years since, I have written across genres, fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and labels such as poet or essayist have been applied to me numerous times, but I much prefer to be known as a writer. I realize that my writing resists being fixed within a genre, even as I am deliberately writing within one, or it seems that way. This award, recognizing me as an emerging writer, is so meaningful precisely because it describes 3 decades of practice that has been constantly evolving, and not so much to get it right, but to continue to see what possibilities exist. I never want to be confined as a particular type of writer, except perhaps as one who is constantly surprising in and surprised by the work that he does. So, for helping me to realize my potential as a writer, I like to pay a special thanks to 4 incredible teachers that I had during my time at the University of Tennessee, where I feel like the real work of writing began for me, and where I also learned that true art is a summit that can never be unattainable, nor is it ever tall enough. So thank you to Marilyn Callett, Michael Knight, Alan Wire, and the late Art Smith. A special thanks to the award sponsor, New Millennium Writings, who so graciously published my very first poems. And to the Friends of Literacy, I thank you for seeing fit to include me in such esteemed company as this year's Hall of Fame honorees. And of course, thank you to my mama, who nurtured me, and to my dog Fry, who always sustains me. Thank you all very much, and have a great evening.
Well, hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see me. I've been without power today, so I'm glad to be back up and running and be here with you tonight. Congratulations, Darius, and all of the inductees this year. I'm honored to be here with you to help celebrate. I'm Rita Quillen, and I'm here to read tonight from my latest book, Some Notes You Hold. I also write novels, so if you'd like to know more about that, you can go to ritasimmsquillen.com, and of course, Union Avenue Books and all of the likely suspects have all of my books, so I hope you'll check those out too. But I'm going to read tonight 3 poems from this book. As Todd mentioned earlier, it's a book about grief, but it's more a book about getting beyond grief, surviving grief, coming to a new place and moving forward. But I'll start with the opening poem, which is about my dad. This poem is called The Gospel of Junior, and it opens with a few lines giving you the Gospel of Junior in just a few short principles, and then it goes into telling you about one of those principles which was my dad believed that you held on to things, you kept things, you never wasted. And I bet a lot of you can identify with this dad or maybe your granddad from that Depression era generation. The Gospel of Junior. The book of Junior was economical, only needing about a half a dozen commandments. Gardening is a sacrament, your tithes paid with hoe and bent back. Keep everything godly clean. Keep the Sabbath, no matter what the hayfield says. In fact, go to church every time the door opens, but don't crow about it. Your life will tell the tale. Most of all, don't throw things away. Everything, all of it, is a gift. My dad's dime store dungeon of detritus down in his dark basement was a wonder. Nothing escaped him, not the broken or the rusty, the warped or the worn. Dozens of nails driven in joists held bags of treasure. Screws, nails, nuts, and bolts, belts, brackets, brushes, and buckets. Everything you could ever want or need or never want or need. His underground hardware was a gold mine to the tinkerer or the child of depression. He could have bought new, but that's heresy in his anti-prosperity gospel. Living cheap is living humble. Transcendence is to be saved by what's broken. Sanctification sent by self-sufficiency. Grace from going without. Junior was the camel passing through that needle's eye every day. A piece of broken pipe in one hand, rusty wire in the other, his dusty broken down brogans with the recycled laces, shuffling down that redemption road. Most of the book is devoted to writing about, though, moving beyond the grief of losing my father and other beloved people. And one of the ways I did that, of course, was through writing. So this seems like a good night to read the poem, Why I Write. Because I cannot draw, but write riddles here in this earth bowl we stew in. Saints and ancients at safe distance, the canvas empty of all the messiness, the ribbon of trees, Clinch Mountain's curves, all become symbol and portent. Flesh belongs on the turkey in the oven, not this hot sauced page. The white nothing of the blank notebook for philosophy, heaven, things dreamt, imagined in pure form, clean and neat, not concrete, nothing smart except the art of leaving everything out and lost. How can we appreciate what we never seek? A poem is a flute, not a shotgun. Let us play it. The song, a riddle in tones. So what if I've seen shooting stars, eclipses, ball lightning, dying foals, epic storms, given all of them to the shotgun page, the colorless void, home of the unborn. Let me write things without words, breathing, blood moving through blue veins, the dumbstruck silence of deja vu, our first look at our mother's face, heartbreak that leaves us dizzy, the long silence when we realize here we're so completely and always alone. And I'll end with a strong theme throughout the book is music. Music has always been my refuge and my balm, my solace, my go-to happy place. So a lot of this book is about music, hence the title. But I'm going to read you a poem about something I used to love to do until the indignities and infirmities of old age put a stop to it. But I used to love to dance. So here's the poem about why I love to dance. It's the lifting, defying the heron's physiology, the whoosh of the heft of all that weight, leaving gravity behind on the creek's glass face that I feel, lifted by the fiddler's hand, weightless for that split second when both left and right foot are off the floor. I lift my arms out like the climbing hawk, soaring over the still world beneath, moving through pockets of hot and cool air, floating like a note on the evening's breath. My hard heel beats like the woodpecker's beak on the old tree bones beneath me, drumming out the tune's heartbeat in a smiling choir of souls in motion. The fiddler and I lock eyes and smile, wordless, weightless, all at once, joyfully alive in buoyant youth, my feet and his hands together, warbler and chickadee, rising to the dusk until the song ends, only the nightingale song, ringing long and strong. thank you to all of you for being here and to the Friends of Literacy for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here and looking forward to hearing the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the Friends of Literacy for giving me this great honor. It is a great honor, and it has made my year. It's wonderful. I thank my friends who nominated me. It's a wonderful company that I'm in, and it's very humbling. And I want to thank my mother for so many things, but for her gift of reading that she gave to me and her creative spirit. And I want to thank my husband, my main collaborator. I've written so many songs with, and it feels weird to be accepting any kind of award without him, but maybe there'll be more. My first thought when I looked at who all had been inducted before was, man, I need to write some more songs. My catalog is a little thin, and I did not have a very creative year in 2020, but I did write one song. And since I'm filming this in the at Macedonia Methodist, is it Methodist Church? On Good Friday. I wrote this song on Good Friday last year, so I have to play this one for you today. On Good Friday 2021, to God be the glory. They say if it rains on Easter Sunday, it's gonna rain 7 Sundays more. Might be superstition, hey, I'm not sure. On a sad Friday evening, Jesus hung on a cross, but on Sunday they rolled the stone away. It might rain on Easter, but the sun will rise anyway. See love with our eyes, but you can see the things it does. We may be blinded by the tears we cry. We might not be ready to trust, but faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. They say if it rains on Easter Sunday, it's gonna rain 7 Sundays more. Might be superstition, hey, I'm not sure. On a sad Friday evening, Jesus hung on a cross, but on Sunday they rolled the stone away. It might rain on Easter, but the sun will rise anyway. And we can't see this enemy with our eyes. We can see the damage it does, and we won't claim a simple victory as our prize. The world is not as it was, but soon we'll meet on a sunny afternoon. We'll have music and laughter, and we'll hold hands. Hey, it might rain on Easter Sunday, might rain 7 Sundays more. Could be superstition, hey, I'm not sure. On a sad Friday evening, Jesus hung on a cross, but on Sunday they rolled the stone away. It might rain on Easter, but the sun will rise anyway. It might rain on Easter, but the sun will rise anyway. Thank you. Better days ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liza Alther. I was honored to be inducted myself into the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame in 2012. So I'm especially happy to be back here again tonight with the Friends of Literacy to honor the new inductees and also to hear samples of the writing that some of my fellow East Tennessee authors have been doing. I grew up just down the road in Kingsport. I went to Dobbins Bennett High School, and then I went to near Boston for college and moved to Vermont, where I've lived ever since. But my family has a farm in Jonesboro, so I've spent a large chunk of each year in Tennessee. I've published 12 books. The first 5 were contemporary psychological novels. The 6th one was a novella called Birdman and the Dancer. It was kind of surreal, and it was based on Greek myth and a series of monotypes by the French painter Françoise Gillot. Then I took a break to help my parents during their final years. And when I came back to my writing 15 years ago, I published another 6 books, most of them set in our region. One was a historical novel called Washed in the Blood about the earliest European settling of the Southern Appalachians. Kinfolks was a memoir about my search for my Melungeon ancestors. I published a volume of short stories called Stormy Weather, and a third of those were set in the mountains. I did a historical, a narrative history called Blood Feud about the Hatfield-McCoy feud. My family's related by marriage to both the Hatfields and the McCoys, so it ended up being kind of a memoir and a meditation on violence. And I also did a dual memoir with Françoise Gillot, the French painter, about the differences and similarities of growing up female in Paris, France, and in Kingsport, Tennessee. And my most recent book is a novel called Swan Song. It's set in the recent past. The main character is named Jessie Drake, and she's an emergency room doctor in Vermont. Her partner of 20 years is a novelist named Kat Justice, and she has recently died. And so Jessie is mired down in despair. So she gets an invitation to be a doctor in the clinic on a cruise ship, and she accepts, hoping that it will jar her out of her grief. So while the ship cruises between in the Southeast Asia and the Middle East, she's trying to come to terms with grief and with death. And all the other passengers are behaving like characters in a French farce, sneaking in and out of each other's staterooms in the middle of the night. Kat has left behind journals that she kept for all her published books. And Jessie has brought the final one with her. It was written while Kat was dying of esophageal cancer for 2 years. And in it, Jessie finds a poem Kat has written, a long poem of 3 parts. And she becomes convinced that it's a chronicle of a new romance, and that Kat had fallen in love with someone else when she was dying and had written this poem about the beginning and middle and end of an intense love affair. But as the book goes on, Jessie comes to realize that it's not about a new love affair. It's about Kat's love of life and her grief at having to leave life. So this poem runs through the middle of the book, kind of like a spine. And I picked the name of the poem, Swan Song, as the name of the novel. So it's very important to the meaning of the novel. So I'm going to read that poem. It's in 3 parts, as I say, and I'll pause after each section so you'll know I'm starting a new section. Swan Song. You've come undone, dear one. Your shoulders show their scars. So zip yourself up and march out my door. Grit your teeth, clench your fists, hide your flinch. Or else shrug those silk straps off your arms and stretch out beside me right now. Let me tend to your wounds, soothe them with salve, bathe them and bind them in balm. I'll touch you so softly tonight, my love, that you'll scarcely recall all that gall. You'll cry as before, but this time for joy, in the red through my window at dawn. I know your chagrin, it's my own. Hope guttered and gone out. Promises scorched. Trust turned to dust. Ashes and soot. Smoke on the wind. But bloodroot can sprout in charred forests when swallows swoop home from the south. As sun thaws the frost, mauve buds swell and burst until snow spreads its shroud in the fall. So stay with me now. Hand me your pain. Look in my eyes. Let love live again. I know the time must come, sweetheart, when you and I won't be attuned. Photos in your memory book, borrowed shirts that weren't returned. My fingers will forget the code I punched to dial you on the phone. My hands won't remember how to stroke you, so you moan out loud. But let's pretend our current bliss will never start to feel banal, and let's agree to face its death like warriors who have dared it all. I will soon be leaving this place where poppies bloom in rose and ochre soil by rocks from the dark side of the moon. I plucked wildflowers in that field that was spiked with asphodel. I clutched them tight while you just smiled and said they'd wilt by night. Of course, I know that blossoms fade and autumn storms must rage, but I had hoped two birds in flight could soar above a plague. I'll try to erase that shadowy room by the river that drifts to the sea and the chasm that gaped between us when you turned your back to me. I'll press this poppy in my book and think some wishful thoughts and hope they help me to forget what might have been, but is not. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to the Friends of Literacy for inviting me and for hosting this wonderful event.
Wow, what a just wonderfully talented group of people. I'm just so honored to be in the same video world as them. And there's also more to come. Chris Wohlwend accepts his Hall of Fame induction for Nonfiction, sponsored by LHP Capital. Kim Trevathan reads from his new book, Against the Current, about paddling upstream, literally. Christina Seymour is inducted into the Hall of Fame with the KPMG Award for Poetry. And Rhea Carmon, Poet Laureate of Knoxville, has something special just for you. And I even changed shirts. So this is getting more and more exciting.
It is only fitting that this is being filmed in Burlington's Macedonia Methodist Church because I grew up about a mile from here. My Swiss-born ancestors are buried just outside, and my paternal grandmother grew up in the house just across the street. Though I've spent time on 6 of the 7 continents and worked at publications around the U.S., my roots are right here. I attended Burlington's Fair Garden School in the 1950s before moving on to Park Junior and then East High School. Riding our bicycles through Burlington's streets and alleys, my friends and I became familiar with its people, its mysteries, its curiosities, and even some of its secrets. In the 60s, I went on to the University of Tennessee and was soon caught up in the cultural changes that were taking place. In 1965, I took a part-time job at the Knoxville Journal, which was then the morning newspaper. There, my real education began. The stories of our culture shift from the idyllic 50s to an era shadowed by a real fear of nuclear annihilation was dominating the news reports. Details of the Vietnam War, history's first major conflict to be broadcast on television uncensored by the government, was a fixture of daily news reports. The innocence of my 50s childhood in Burlington, a world that I had taken for granted, was gone. And thanks to the non-reversible march of technology, it would not return. From the late 70s through the early 90s, I worked for publications in Miami, Charlotte, Louisville, Dallas, Kansas City, and Atlanta. My byline appeared in papers ranging from the Greenville Sun to the New York Times to the Paris-based International Herald Tribune. When I returned to Knoxville in the late 90s, I revisited the streets and alleys of my neighborhood, remembering sandlot football and after-midnight bicycle rides. Then there were drives through Fort Sanders, visits to residences, and hangouts from my UT days. When I drove by the house I'd rented on Clinch Avenue in the late 60s, I spotted on the front porch a beat-up sofa that looked suspiciously like the one I had left there when I moved out in 1970. During the drive-arounds, I decided that I wanted to write about my time here during the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. They were mostly fun times, and it was only in retrospect that I realized how important and irreversible the changes of that era were. The result of my revisits was Restless Native, the column that I wrote for the late, much lamented Knoxville Mercury. Those columns became Ridge Running, my memoir of Appalachia. I am honored and most grateful to the Friends of Literacy for recognizing my efforts. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Kim Trevathan, and first of all, I'd like to congratulate all the inductees and thank the Friends of Literacy for inviting me to read a little bit. I'm going to read from my new book, Against the Current, published in February by the University of Tennessee Press. It's my fourth book with them, so I'm glad they're still putting up with me. I got to set this up just a little bit. I canoed the Tennessee River going the right way downstream back in 1998, and that was the subject of my first book. And I took along a dog named Jasper. So in 2018, for some reason, when I was on the verge of turning 60, I thought it might be a good idea to do it again. And this time going upstream, and this time starting in early spring instead of late summer. I wanted to see how the river changed in 20 years, and I wanted to see how I had changed. And I truly did not know if I could make it or not. I started to have more and more doubts the closer my launch came. I actually had to delay my launch for one day because the floodgates at Paducah were closed. So 2018 in the spring was a very wet and a very cold spring. The dams were spilling with their gates wide open, and I had to approach these and lock through them going upstream. So I didn't know if I could do it. So those were problematic things for an aging paddler. And so to add to it, I thought I'd take along a fairly new dog with me named Maggie, who's a 10-month-old puppy who weighed 65 pounds and had an excess of energy. So I'm going to read from a chapter that's a little over halfway through the trip, and it takes place 3 years ago yesterday on my 60th birthday. And it sort of gives you a sense of some of the challenges of the trip and how I was dealing with them. Sometimes not so good, sometimes better. And it'll give you a sense of where I had to spend the night, or one of those challenges of trying to find a place to spend the night on the Tennessee River when you're in a canoe. Well, this is from a chapter called Mockingbird People. An unholy April headwind rose up against me within a mile of Bridgeport Island, my destination for the day. On that wind floated the sounds of a live band. As if rehearsing, they would begin a song suddenly and end in the middle of it, though part of this might have been the effect of the variable wind in my distance from the band. As I got closer, I recognized Townes Van Zant's Poncho and Lefty, which I had on my phone and played from time to time on the trip. It told two stories, one of a criminal on the run, the other of a lawman on the hunt for him, a good song to travel by. The band, somewhere upstream, was doing a passable cover of it. It helped me work hard to make progress toward the island. If there was some kind of music festival, I hoped I would be allowed to camp among them. They're playing one of my favorite songs, made me think we might be kindred spirits. Between me and the island, 5 power lines crossed above the river, the farthest one close to the tip of the island. These were my progress markers. As I gazed up at power line number 1, the band started in on Marshall Tucker's Can't You See? Got about halfway through it, and then it sounded like someone opened fire. The music stopped, and the pop continued for 5 minutes or so. I feared the worst, imagining a scorned groupie or a recently fired drummer. But what could I do about it? I was struggling to reach that first power line, and the sun was beginning to sink below the horizon. The concert seemed to be on the right bank of the island, and because of the current's push, I had to favor the left side, which faced the town of Bridgeport. After an hour, I realized I was on the dreaded treadmill, paddling hard and getting nowhere. I could tell because I was no closer to wire number 1. Then I got mad because I was turning 60 on this day and stuck on the water when I should be taking it easy on the bank with a nice dehydrated dinner. I paddled faster. The band started up again, and even though I was glad they hadn't all been shot, I discovered the closer I got, the worse they sounded. Distance had been their friend. The air began to chill as the day dimmed, and I gave up overtaking the wires and angled toward the left bank, a ferrying move that allowed me to make progress upstream. The shoreline looked awful, no place to land, only steep, muddy banks, even where the power lines crossed. Hugging the left bank, I resigned myself to trying for a boat ramp about 2 more miles upstream. Then I saw a light up ahead, out from the bank, as if on a pier. I suspected it was a private dock, but the closer I got, the more people I could see milling about. It was almost dark, but as I inched closer, the place resolved itself into not 1 but 2 piers that could only be intended for public use, with 2 boat ramps right there. I had struck gold on this, my 60th birthday. After a 17-mile day, the last 2 on the speedy treadmill, I was exhausted. In the easy water near the piers, I floated up without paddling, not sure I had the strength to get out of the boat right away. I was trying to pull up without disturbing the anglers standing along the pier casting lines. The band started up again, a song I couldn't recognize. The lead singer's voice was so screechy and distorted. "Where are you coming from?" asked a voice from the pier. I shielded my eyes against the glare of the security light and found the source of this young but authoritative drawl, a boy in muddy rubber boots. He had reeled in his line when he saw Maggie and me emerge from obscurity. "You mean today?" I asked. When he didn't respond, I said I'd come from Mud Creek Wildlife Management Area today, but that I'd paddled from Paducah starting March 21st, and I was a little more than halfway through my trip up the whole river. "How old are you?" "I turned 60 today." "Well, happy birthday." I was ready to unload the boat and set up another stealth camp, in no mood for an interview. Something about this kid, Canyon was his name, slowed me down. His intonation reminded me of the kids in the movie version of To Kill a Mockingbird. I was, after all, still in Alabama. Barely. I told him what the thwart and the yoke were on the canoe, and he asked me what I'd been eating, so I told him about dehydrated foods as well. "I wish they would stop," he said. He looked across the river where the invisible band was playing. "What is this place?" I asked. It was clearly a public park of some sort, but it wasn't on the charts. Kenyon paused for a minute to consider this question. "It's the river." I realized that's probably what his folks called this place when they brought him here. Kenyon, a slim kid, was wearing a pair of shorts and a white shirt splattered with mud. He couldn't remember how he'd gotten muddy. I spotted a dozen or so RVs up on the hill, up at the top of the hill behind a fence. "Is that a campground up there?" I was still sitting in the boat looking up at Canyon. I hadn't decided yet where I was going to camp or where I'd tie up the boat. "No," he said, "people live there." I'll stop there.
It's really an honor to be recognized in this way by Friends of Literacy and the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame. From an early age, I was a writer. In kindergarten, I was the girl who had trouble playing with others, but would write a one-line story that the teacher shared with the class. In 4th grade, I gave my first book, which was just a spiral-bound notebook with crayon drawings and a short story, to my teacher, Mr. Mitchell, who I thank for being someone I wanted to share that with. I wrote poems about butterflies and a Barbie diary with a lock. So I appreciate the early nurturing of myself as a writer, the trips to the local library with my parents, where I grew up in Pennsylvania, and being read to. I'd also like to thank the supportive English department at Penn State Altoona, where I got my bachelor's in English, particularly Dr. Sandra Petrolinas for offering me a research position with an NEH-funded project to digitize Mary Moody Emerson's manuscripts, with which I could quit my job at a grocery store cashiering. and other faculty at that college who created a safe learning space for me to explore my work. Erin Murphy, Lee Peterson, Steve Sherrill, Dr. Todd Davis, Dr. Megan Simpson, Dr. Ian Marshall, Dr. Laura Rotuno, and Dr. Tom Listka. My teachers at West Virginia University, Marianne Salmon, Jim Harms, Kevin Oderman, and Mark Brazaitis, and the writing mentors I met through publishing or writing festivals who supported my work and offered advice: Carol Frost, Faith Sheeran, Lisa Lewis, Terrence Hayes, Karen McCadden, and Dawn Potter. I'd like to thank the Wick Poetry Center at Kent State University for believing in my work early on and offering my first publication in their series, Speak Peace, American Poets Respond to Vietnamese Children's Paintings. The publisher of my first chapbook, Structo Magazine, a small press in the UK, headed then by Ewan Monahan and Matthew Landrum. The publishers of my first book at Glassfire Press, Amy Kay, and the editors for the selection of When is a Burning Tree, and their promise to publish works that replenish the spirit, which so many of their books have done for me. I'd like to thank the cover artist, Eileen Shalhoub, for allowing me to use her beautiful painting for the cover. The piece is called I Am a Lonely Road and I Am Traveling. And I'd especially like to thank my colleagues at Maryville College for their support: Kim Trevathan, Dr. Neil Norman, Jan Taylor, Scott Steele, and Lynn Conning. Administration and division chairs, Dr. Sam Overstreet and Dr. Will Phillips, for encouraging my own creative writing and the exploration of my passions through teaching and my work. My students and the staff at Impressions Literary Magazine, past and present, for making my job easy and being creative, inspiring, and extremely brilliant and resilient and all good things. My writing friends for lending their eyes and ears to me and to my work: Charity Gingrich, Jan Taylor, Nancy Vela, Sam Satimio Randolph, Evan Blake, Elon Young, Rachel King, Erin Elizabeth Smith, Jessie Lewis, Rebecca Dover-Spike, Melissa Atkinson Mercer, Will Wolfett, and many more. And of course, my personal support group, my close friends, my parents, my brother, and my very dynamic spouse, Brian Glunt, and perhaps most of all, my dogs, Gracie and Mira, for their unconditional positive regard. And I'd also like to read a poem. I think it's evident in my work that East Tennessee imagery informs a lot of my setting. So this is one more recent poem. Let me love the world barely, like the open pot of peonies waving their impartial petals, while cars hum along the stale mountain road, full of what's left and invisible from mufflers and exhaust, cigarette smoke trailing out a window, fast food trash hurled like a person thought it belonged to a grassy ditch to begin with. I remember years of utter curiosity, especially when aware and afraid. Where did that screw in the parking lot come from? What is broken because of its loss? Or the mossy picture frame by the florist with tiny suns carved in its corners? Who cared so little to leave it to mold? Or what distracted its owner? A failing, a grief, a struggle? Why not, I think now, did I imagine joy? Their garden arranged like stained glass, an antique hand-painted, rose-laden mirror so satisfying that a handmade frame was the distraction. We learn how to lie to preserve, always, never, forever, eternal. What we know of eternal is that we're not. What we know in this moment, we may not the next. And talking about the fog can make it foggier. Words themselves evoke. How many types of heron? How many kinds of dandelion? How many shades of sadness become wisdom, or obsessions become thrill? It is by the blurry red sunset that only resonates. Only as in one and only one, but also only as many. Thank you.
Wow, that was an absolutely beautiful poem. There I am. Hi, everybody. My name is Rhea Carmon. I am the Knoxville Poet Laureate, and I am just so honored to be included in what the Friends of Literacy is doing, and really happy to be back. The last time I was able to participate, I was inducted. And so now I get to share 3 poems from my upcoming book that will be published by Iris Publishing. And it is called Let the Sun Shine In, kind of off of my stage name, Rhea Sunshine. I tend to write about life, my story. And so I really hope that you all enjoy these pieces. First one is Conversations. Let me learn your walk, your talk, your way of thinking. Though different from mine, let me consider changing. Let me decide that I love you and let me not change. And you still know that I care for you. Let us balance each other into the people that we were meant to be as we share words and conversations of greatness trapped and circulating between us. Let us create poetry in these moments of forever growth. Water my soul with your openness. Fertilize my mind with the richness of your life. Let me be the sunshine to harvest beauty in the diversity. Open your voice that I may hear your words. Let them slide into the canals of my ear. Provide some clarity of how I should think of you. Let your words and passion teach a new way to journey to love. Let love for humanity win. Let my heart be shown in my silence or my voice. Let you see me for the person that I am. Let me see you for who you are, and let us walk together. Let us join together. Let us change a world that wants to keep us separate as we find the way to communicate. Let us see life in the eyes of one another and choose to keep looking for it. Let us look for love rather than understanding. Let us be broken together, human. Let us experience utopia when we share. Come and talk with me. Teach me your walk. Teach me your talk. Teach me you, and I will teach you me. The second piece is called The Greatness Within. I wrote it some time ago, but it is just an encouragement for us all to realize our greatness. I was never meant to apologize for the greatness that is within me. I was never meant to shrink or be small in the presence of men. I was only meant to shine like sunshine. Every word a solar flare flickering to ignite a flame. Today, I found myself saying sorry for the space that I occupy, apologizing for being me, and it made me feel broken, like something in me is wrong, but I want to be healed, refusing to apologize for existing as the one God created. I will not apologize that my warmth, my size, my smile, or my words may at times make you feel small. I will only ask you to find the greatness within yourself and never apologize for being you. And then the last piece is actually a really old piece from college. And my husband found it in an old notebook. And here it is. He was like, this is my favorite poem that you've ever written. So here's to old works coming back and ringing out true. And I just want to say congratulations to everybody. Before I read this last piece and sign off, congratulations tonight. Go forth and be great. Eternal life. I want to live forever. I want to dwell in moments of sincere bliss until the day I close my eyes and go to meet my maker. And then I want to live forever in the memory of those moments. Share as family stories because I changed somebody's life, made it a little better than it was before I came along. And I want to be a legend to the women in my family, both young and old, and even those unborn. I want to be an example For all believers of faith through stories, tests, and trials, I want to create in every thought through the words on these pages. Take my mother and father into forever with me. Share infinity with the woman so close that sometimes she is me, the epitome of what a friend should be. She cradles me in her mind, delicately loving the woman I was and am to be. Carry young poets on my shoulders into a destiny I cannot live to see, but I will live forever. In the words that describe me, pure and real, a lover of logos and rhematos, a worshiper. Let my praise for the Most High live on forever with me. For as long as there is a thank you, Jesus, that can be uttered, I will live on in his praises. I want to live forever in poetry. For poetry is me and can never be stopped, terminated or erased. It is the best of the soul working frantically to express life. And as long as life needs expression, poetry and I will breathe and live forever.
What a moving performance. Thank you so much, Rhea, for sharing your always sunny words with us. Hello, everyone. I'm Beth Miller. I'm the president of the Friends of Literacy Board of Directors. And on behalf of the full board, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight to celebrate the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame inductees and the written, spoken, and sung words of our fellow East Tennesseans and other regional guests. Everyone participating in tonight's event is part of the beautiful fabric of our area's culture, and I'm so thrilled to have an opportunity to celebrate that, even if it must be done virtually. It's been a tough year for all of us trying to operate in a more hands-off world than what we're used to, but I'm proud of the efforts of the Friends of Literacy staff, volunteers, and students who have managed to adapt each of our programs so that they could continue to succeed even when distance has been necessary. As I'm sure you can imagine, the disruptions in in-person schooling and employment challenges in some sectors means literacy programs are more needed now than ever. And with your help, we will make sure everyone has the support they need to improve their reading and writing skills so that they have the opportunities they need to be successful. The link to our donation page is in the chat section of this Zoom. Please consider making a donation to support our adult literacy, HiSET diploma prep, family literacy, English language learning, and reading mentor programs. Every little bit helps us in our mission to eradicate illiteracy in East Tennessee, and we greatly appreciate your support. And I just want to also invite everyone to join us again in person next year. We will be back to having a live event on April 8th at the Foundry on the fair site, when we celebrate next year's Writers Hall of Fame Awards Gala. So thank you again for your support and enjoy the rest of the evening. And I'm going to send it back over to Todd to introduce the next set of performers.
Now we will honor Shannon Burke's fiction writing as we induct him into the Hall of Fame with an award sponsored by Heron Connell Insurance. Then Ellie Cypher will do a short reading and talk about the young adult voice in fiction. The team behind Compass Knox, Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, accept their Hall of Fame induction for journalism, sponsored by the UT Libraries. And Ernie Freeberg talks about the early animal rights movement and Kaz Walker. This is going to be awesome.
Hello, my name is Shannon Burke. I don't know how this is going to be presented, so I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a fiction writer. I also write for TV and movies. I'm being recognized in the fiction category. And in my acceptance speech, I just want to talk a little bit about my path to becoming a writer. My journey to this point for years and years was like total failure, seemingly pointless struggle and solitude. I didn't go to school for writing. I didn't even know that many people who wrote or even read. Like, I just knew that I liked to read and that I wanted to write. For about 10 years, I wrote for about 5 or 6 hours a day. every day. I was like super diligent, and it all came to nothing. I couldn't sell anything. No one read what I did. It seemed completely pointless. And at the same time, like while this was going on, I was ruining my life. Like I was selling t-shirts in the street or working in the Pizza Hut. I was living in the worst places you could possibly imagine. Like at one point I was going to say it was a converted laundry room, but it actually was a laundry room. Just the laundry, the washing machine wasn't in it. And there were wasps in the walls. So all day I'd be sitting there in that room and I could hear the wasps in the walls. And at one point, a friend who was in medical school, he comes by and he looks at me and he's like, dude, you're living in a laundry room with wasps in the walls. He's like, give it up. It became a sort of joke. Like all my friends are just like, why are you doing this? Like it's not working out. But I want to be a writer. So I just kept doing it. The progress was slow and incremental, but I was learning my craft. And around the time I moved to Tennessee, it's about 20 years ago, things started to go better for me. I sold some books, got a little recognition. I started making a living doing it. Everything I've published as a writer, they're written about places all over the country and about different time periods. All of it was written here in Knoxville. It's been a really good place for me for work and to live as well. It's been the good years, but you never really get over those years of failure. Like it lives inside you. So it's satisfying after the years of futility to have some recognition, to become a member of a fine group of writers. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the friends of the library and everyone involved, the organizers and sponsors, and every volunteers, everyone involved in this wonderful event. I'm really honored to be here tonight to talk to everybody. And thank you, or congratulations to everyone being honored tonight. It's such a wonderful event, and it's so great to be around people to celebrate writing and authors and Tennessee. So as we said, I'm Ellie Cypher. I am a writer, author, and doctor living here in East Tennessee, as we can tell. And my debut novel came out from Simon & Schuster, a book for young readers, just this past February. So brand new book out in the world, and I'm really proud of it. It is a pretty gritty tale about survival and out in the wilderness. So Simon & Schuster pitches the book as True Grit meets The Revenant, but with magic. So it's something really fun and a little bit different. So when we talked about and touched on what we wanted to discuss this evening, one of the things that first came to my mind was wanting to talk about voice. And so I feel often that children's literature, although I write in all age categories, including adult and poetry, one of the things that children's literature is often overlooked about is this idea that it is not as complex or as thematically intense as a number of other categories. And I think that's a really interesting perspective, but I also think what that really fails to take into account, and what something that really draws me to young adult literature and children's literature, is the voice. And so to me, voice in children's literature is all about hope. So when we talk about voice, we usually talk about the lens and the filter through which we as authors are able to tell our narrative, and the filter through which, therefore, the reader is able to discuss it and see it. And one of the things that I love so much, and I think the best young adult literature does, is it really is a world and words and whole universes built on possibility and hope and potential. Because when you're that age, when you are coming into this world and you're trying to figure out who you are, there is so much before you, and the world is opening, and there's this immense feeling of expansion and greatness, and it's all there. And you can leave who you were and decide who you want to be. And so when we talk about voice in young adult literature, I am really talking about a narrative and a voice and a perspective that brings hope and comfort and possibility to this world. And that's what I'm drawn to in children's literature. And I really hope that if you haven't tried it, you give some of the best books a chance, because that fuel is something I think is desperately needed for everybody today. And so I thought I would do a little bit of a reading from my debut book, just to give everyone a little bit of perspective. It is a story about a girl who grows up in a world of ice, like a western icy frontier, where her land is sort of been swallowed whole by this encroaching winter. And there are myths that lurk out in the ice and snow. It's something she's never believed. And then her sister is kidnapped, and she has to do everything she can to try and save her. So if you'll bear with me, starting sort of at the back part of this novel, I wanted to start with chapter 19. Our main character, Jory, and Cody are out on the ice, and they're out in search of Brenna, who is her sister, and trying to bring her back home. So this is from chapter 19, Red Dawn Rising. Sometime in the very early hours, the stars came out. Little echoes of light in the dark, they hung bright and lonesome against the night. A midnight map scrolled across the world. To the north, the eye of the Great Bear were the largest. High and luminous light, it shone mercifully brilliant, blinking down, guiding us on true, toward Knocknamora, toward Bren. The shimmer of a false sun hung on the horizon like a mirage. There were still hours till real light would rise. Pressing my hand to the ice stone pendant under my coat, which had gone cold, I kept us walking. 1 foot, then the next. 1, 2, 1, 2. Just keep it moving. Hours and hours passed with little other than the beating of our hearts to mask our progress. 1 foot, then the next. When the aching white flatness finally broke, it weren't good. A massive cleft cut across the ice, a gaping dark wound, it split the horizon wide. There would be no going round, not for leagues and leagues. Time we didn't have. My only hope were that somewhere along its icy grin, it were narrow enough to jump. Not a happy prospect. I inched closer, dropping the litter, and leaned over, real careful-like, unsure if the ledge could support me. From the depths, a gust of cold air raced up, stealing at my breath. Sheer walls of blue ice plummeted hundreds of feet down, their path eaten away by the rushing of a massive river. The churning crystal blue of a glacier-born water. A sinking dread filled my guts as the growling waters reverberated from down deep. I shuffled back. Racing water, I knew, would always flow its way to shore, because water always found its way. I just hoped we would too. With care, I guided us along the most stable section of the western edge, searching for a way across, for some lone strip of ice not yet pulled under by the river below. It felt like hours passed before I found one strong enough, a frozen strand of impossible silk. The narrow bridge of ice spanned the fathoms-deep fissure below, just wide enough. "Stay close," I called out. Cody and the dogs came to my side as the first stretch of sunrise were just beginning to break over the edge of the ice. In it, Cody gave me a grim but determined look. I unhitched the dogs, taking the reins. I gave Fen a pat on the head and were rewarded by a slow wag of her tail as she stood. Tiptoeing my way out, I tested the bridge. Mercifully, nothing broke or cracked. We'd just have to see. Swallowing, I took a full step out onto the strip of ice and stopped, listening for shifting, for that slow creeping that filled your gut with fear, just before the whole world broke and gave way beneath your bones. And then if you'll bear with me, we have another chapter. So this is chapter 33. This is from Tombs Made of Stone, chapter 33. The weight of the storm fell from my shoulders, sudden as the dropping of a stone. I collapsed to my knees. I took hysterical long to settle my gasps into something more like breathing. Inside the fissures of the mountain, it were a different world, silent. Panting, I pressed my arms to the hard earth below. My ears rang with the loss of the wind. My face and limbs burned with it. I shoved Cody up to sitting. Before I fell against his side, the wind scratching at the entrance, hungry, angry, waiting. Around us, long veins of silver ore spiraled into darkness above, a chimney of perfect stone. We had been so close. I took a long, shaking breath, ribs rattling against my burning lungs, Cody's head resting against my shoulder, his breathing shallow and painful. I pressed a hand to Cody's head, leaning my cheek to his, breathing with him, out in, just breathing. "I'm sorry, Cody," I whispered. His hands tightened in mine, and I knew in that moment, in a spike of painful clarity, what all those people out there on the flats had learned long ago. What they knew as they felt the blood freeze in their veins, the breath pool in their lungs. No one was coming. because out here there was no one left to save you but yourself. My head went light as growing warmth built in my chest as the storm outside, cold and hungry, blotted out the rest of the world. So, yeah. But I promise it's not a happy ending. It seems so doom and gloom. But yeah, so thank you so much to Friends of the Library and East Tennessee Hall of Fame, and congratulations to all the writers. And I look forward to reading, writing, and loving and living in Tennessee. Bye.
Good evening. I'd like to, first of all, thank the Friends of Literacy for this award, being inducted into the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame. It is indeed an honor to join the group of members. It's very unusual and exciting to be in a group that includes Cormac McCarthy, Quentin Tarantino, and Dolly. But the award is an award for, we hope, a lifetime of work, a career of work, and there are a lot of people that have contributed to my career. Starting with my parents, who supported me in everything that I did, and teachers that I had. Michael Suits, who was a fantastic English teacher at my high school and introduced me to the beauty of language and literature. Art Smith, who is also a member of the late Art Smith, who's also a member of the Hall of Fame, who was one of my instructors in college and supported my dream of writing for a living. And then, of course, in journalism, my longtime managing editor at the News Sentinel, Tom Chester, who was a fierce journalist who always supported his reporters. And of course, we couldn't have done Compass without our wives. And my wife, Kimberly Jones, has been very supportive and fantastic. When we started Compass in 2018, we had a lot of help as well. Joe Sullivan, late editor of and publisher of the Metropulse, helped us out a great deal, and Tricia Bateman helped us out a great deal in our designs work. But the person that I want to thank the most is Jesse, my partner. I don't know who said this first, but one piece of advice that I always try to follow is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are. And I did that. Jesse's one of the smartest, most capable journalists I've ever known, and it's a real honor to work with him. And also, want to thank also our readers. Every writer owes everything to their readers, and without them, we have nothing to do. So to our readers, I want to say thank you as well. One of the reasons we got into Compass was because we believe in local journalism. We believe that journalism is more than just sharing information, for people to make decisions. That's well and good. But at its best, journalism is kind of the glue that can hold society together. People can, it's a tool that people can use to make their lives better. And that is the most gratifying thing about journalism. Most gratifying thing about our work with Compass has been helping to improve our community. And once again, I'll sign off now. Thank you very much to the Friends of Literacy and to everyone that supports the organization.
Well, thanks, Scott, and I very much return the compliments to Mr. Barker. What we are doing right now would be impossible without the two of us, and I think when we first started, we both said to each other that we were about the only people who we could think of that we would even be willing to try to do something like this with, because we both had such high regard for each other's experience and abilities. And also, I need to very much thank my wife, Casey Fox, for being incredibly supportive as we were getting Compass up and running, and ever since. I also have many journalism teachers, editors, co-workers over the years to thank. Too many to name, but I think everybody who practices the craft of journalism at some point in their career has benefited from, that one great editor or that one great coworker who really kind of helped show you how to do it, and also made you understand why it was important. I've been thinking about, and I want to say also thank you to the Friends of Literacy. This is a great honor, as Scott said, especially to be inducted sort of in the wake of so many other great East Tennessee writers in the Hall of Fame, some of whom I've been fortunate enough to know and work with. East Tennessee as a region is rich in stories and storytellers both, and it really is an honor to kind of be counted in that number. I'm not from East Tennessee originally. I moved here about 25 years ago, and to feel now rooted here is not something that I take lightly. I've been thinking a little bit about the connection between journalism and writing, because I've always kind of identified myself as a reporter first and a writer second, because the reporting to me has always felt like the core of the job. That's where you have to go out and get the material, because we're not fiction writers, we're not poets. We don't necessarily generate the material by sitting on a park bench or all of the other things that writers of that caliber do. We have to go out and really kind of prospect for those stories, and we rely tremendously on people being willing to share those stories with us. And over the decades, I have had just thousands and thousands of people willingly share their thoughts, their perspectives, their experiences, and often the very intimate details of their lives with me for no reason other than that I asked them to. And it's a great feeling as a writer when you sit down with that trove of information and anecdotes and experiences that you just wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And so I feel tremendously indebted every day that I do this work to the people who are willing to talk and to share their perspectives so that we can share them with the rest of the world. So thank you to them. Thanks, of course, to our readers. As Scott said, none of us can do this work without people to receive it and then to give us feedback on the work that we're doing. And thanks again to Friends of Literacy.
Thanks very much. I'm Ernie Freeberg, and congratulations to all those who are being honored tonight. It's an honor for me to be here to be able to share this with you. I'd like to share with you two short pieces from recent publications of mine, one from my own book, which came out in the fall, and another from a man who is famous in East Tennessee, but not as an author, as you'll see why. First, my new book is a history of the origins of the animal rights movement as seen through the life of Henry Burke. Burke founded the ASPCA in 1866, and he was both beloved and ridiculed for his war on cruelty during the Gilded Age. And this is a sample from one of the chapters about his battle with Kit Burns. Henry Burke's war on animal cruelty brought him to some harrowing places: underground livery stables where hundreds of horses and mules dwelled in reeking dusk; Brooklyn dairy farms, where feeble cows were fed the waste grain of distilleries to produce the swill milk that sickened the city's children; butcher shops that plucked live chickens; and medical schools that practiced surgery on stray dogs, harrowing their neighbors with shrieks of pain late into the night. While defending animals, Burke saw the darkest side of human nature: the desperate poverty, the sadism, the ignorance, and the indifference to suffering that motivated so many of these acts. Burke's crusade against cruelty would bring him to many dark and unlikely corners of the city, but none stranger than a Water Street rooftop on an April afternoon in 1868. Accompanied by a police officer, Burke peered through the skylight of a saloon called Sportsman's Hall into a crowded, fetid theater of cruelty. Stacked up in the bleachers up to the ceiling, several hundred men roared with excitement as two powerful dogs locked in a bloody death grip. Urged on by the screaming men around them, the dogs tore at each other's faces. In the corner, a pile of mangled rat corpses, evidence that the evening's warm-up entertainment included a ratting contest that pitted trained rat-killing terriers against dozens of frenzied rodents. To Berg, this seemed a glimpse of hell, and the men reveling in this brutality, nothing less than demons. Surveying the scene, Berg fixed his eye on one man, the unholy host of the evening's entertainment, the notorious Kit Burns. Owner and impresario of Sportsman's Hall, Burns was cheering on his prize dog Belcher, the hometown favorite and the victor in many brutal contests in that very ring. Even in that raucous crowd, Burns was hard to miss. A jolly, heavy-set man dressed in a crimson shirt and suspenders, he radiated a pugnacious confidence that gave him a remarkable resemblance to one of his bulldogs. He had a red beastly face, as one reporter described him, quote, deeply indented with smallpox marks and an expression, to use the words of a man who knows him well, as if he would chaw up a man if he got him foul. If the dog pit was hell, here was a Beelzebub straight out of Central Casting. The gamblers watched Belcher and a Boston challenger named Venus as they locked jaws in a gory death match. Up above, Berg prepared to seize a victim of his own. Of all the crimes against animals being perpetrated in this city, he considered the working class entertainments of dogfighting and cockfighting to be the most barbaric. That made the owner of Sportsman's Hall one of his first and favorite targets. That was a selection from my book, A Traitor to His Species, about Henry Berg and the birth of the animal rights movement in the United States in the Gilded Age. And here's another piece. This is done by a local author, Kaz Walker. Not so long ago, a couple of years ago, Josh Hodge, the late Josh Hodge, a graduate student at UT, worked with me, and he put together a book of the writings about and some oral history about Kaz Walker, including some writings from Kaz Walker's own autobiography, which the great local historian Bruce Wheeler describes as near hallucinogenic. And here's another, seems thematically connected example of irrational and exuberant violence, this time perpetrated by none other than Kaz Walker, former mayor of Knoxville. This is from his autobiography. It's called A Finger for an Ear. Not long after I went into the grocery business, in fact, this was my first store, I kept a horse and a wagon to deliver my groceries. A man came into my store and asked me if I would move a stone for him in my horse and wagon. I said, I sure will. He asked, what will you charge me? I answered, it will cost you $1. Some of the boys in the store told me that he would not pay his debts. I said, he will pay me, or I will beat it out of him. I moved the stone for him. He promised to pay me the $1 on Friday, and he didn't even speak to me. Then I was coming home from the store on Sunday, and I met him, and he didn't speak to me again. I stopped him, and I told him, I told you that if you didn't pay me the $1, that I would beat it out of you. He said, you can't. I tied into him, and he was very much of a man. I was getting the best of him when he grabbed my hand and bit my middle finger off at the first knuckle. Then I grabbed him by the ear and bit just about all of his ear off. They took me to the hospital, and I carried the end of my finger in the palm of my hand. The doctor fixed my finger, and it's still crooked to this day. This man beat me to the hospital, and no one was in the room but him when I went in after having my finger treated. I had about bit his upper lip off as well. He was babbling about something, and I whipped him again in the treatment room. He rebit my finger off, and the doctor put it back again. I went back to my aunt and uncle's house, where I was boarding, and the next morning I got up and went to work at my store on Vine Street. This man never paid me the $1, but they never did stop shopping at my store. He died approximately 2 months later with pneumonia fever. I went to the funeral home to view the body just to see how much ear I had chewed off. It was all gone except for a small bit at the earlobe. I've got some advice I want to pass out to everybody. Don't ever try to beat $1 out of anyone. So I hope you find that advice from Kaz Walker useful and that you found these readings interesting. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this great ceremony. Good night.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Yeah, it's really hard to follow up Kaz Walker there by Ernie's reading, but I'm not here to beat a dollar out of anybody, but I am here to talk a little bit about Friends of Literacy. My name is Brian Brules. I'm a board member and a very, very proud East Tennessean. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I'd like to also congratulate all of the Hall of Fame honorees. Education is something that it's my life's passion. And it's something that changes lives and even family trees. And the foundation of all education, all learning is literacy. Tonight, we've recognized so many talented individuals. And even in this virtual environment, this evening is just a wonderful showcase of the transformative power that literacy provides. So I hope that you'll please, consider joining us on our mission of transforming lives through literacy. The link to our donation page is going to be in the chat box here. To quote one of our honorees tonight, Rhea Carmon, go forth and be great. I challenge everyone out there to help Friends of Literacy continue changing lives by helping us go forward and being great with your support. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your continued support, and congratulations again to all of tonight's honorees. Back to you, Todd.
To wrap up the evening, James Glen Stovall is inducted into the Writers Hall of Fame with the Knox News Award for Lifetime Achievement. And Karen E. Reynolds will perform a song about her hometown.
Thank you very much to all of those in the Friends of Literacy organization for this great honor. I confess that it came as quite a surprise when I heard about it, particularly after I told my good friend David Lauber, who nominated me, that I did not think there was any chance that I would receive it. There are, of course, many people to thank, far too many for the time allotted to me or for your patience. Hundreds of people along my life's journey have encouraged me to write and have offered their support in 1,000 ways for my writing efforts, and I thank them all. I am currently the writer in residence at the Blount County Public Library, and my association with that organization and its people has brought home to me how important libraries are and have been to both me as a writer and as a citizen. Our libraries are staffed by lots of dedicated professionals, and I have been privileged to work with many at the Blount County Public Library. But our libraries are supported by many amateurs like you and me. These are people who recognize the importance of libraries and the contributions they make to the community. One of these supporters, perhaps the most famous of all, was Andrew Carnegie. No name is more associated with public libraries than that of Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie has his name on lots of things, to be sure. Carnegie Hall, Carnegie Mellon University. But for most of the 20th century, America and a good part of the world paired his name with the word library. Carnegie once wrote that a person's life should be divided into 3 parts. The first part should be devoted to learning as much as possible. The second should be devoted to gaining as much wealth as possible. And the third should be devoted to giving away as much of that wealth as possible to causes that would advance the public good. Carnegie followed his own dictum. He was born in Scotland in 1835, and when he was 12, he immigrated with his family to western Pennsylvania. He had little opportunity for formal schooling and worked at a number of jobs to help support the family. The young Carnegie enjoyed reading and learning, but books were expensive and out of reach for boys of his station. The young Carnegie got lucky, however. He met Colonel James Anderson, a local man who let boys like Andrew borrow 1 book each Saturday night from his 400-volume library. Andrew rarely missed a Saturday, and his enjoyment of reading turned into a passion. Carnegie never forgot Anderson's generosity. He vowed at the time that he would give other young boys the same opportunity that he had for reading if he ever had the chance. He got that chance, and he kept his vow. By the turn of the 20th century, Carnegie had built a vast steel empire and had become by far the richest man in the world. In 1901, he sold his steel interest for more than $300 million. More than a decade before that, Carnegie had begun donating money for public libraries, and after his retirement, he devoted much of his energy to his philanthropic endeavors. In all, he helped build and fund more than 3,000 libraries, many of which would never have existed but for his donations. He once wrote, "It was from my early experience that I decided there was no use to which money could be applied so productively as the founding of a public library." We may not have the resources of an Andrew Carnegie at our disposal, and we may not be able to build whole libraries with a single check. Each of us has something to contribute, however, something that would make life for lots of people much better. So tonight, in accepting this wonderful award, I ask that you think about your local library and what you can contribute to it. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen E. Reynolds, and I am proud to be a part of tonight's broadcast to celebrate this year's inductees into the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame. I was blessed to be inducted in 2019, so I would like to welcome each of tonight's inductees into the fold, as well as congratulate and thank them for their wonderful contributions to our local and regional creative culture. I'd also like to thank the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame for supporting Friends of Literacy, because that work also brings so much to benefit to our community. I hope all of you watching tonight will support this fine organization as well. Tonight, I'm going to play a song that I wrote about my love for my hometown, right here in East Tennessee. As a touring artist, you're often not home much. And regardless this past rather odd year that has kept so many of us locked inside our houses, well, there's still nothing like returning to where your heart lives. This is little itty bitty East Tennessee town. I was born in the shadow of a red oak tree. Mama and Daddy weren't expecting me, but they thanked the Lord for sending me down to that little itty bitty East Tennessee town. Yeah. Some folks thought we were poor white trash, but we had more love than they had cash. My daddy worked hard till the mill shut down in that little itty bitty East Tennessee town. No matter where I go, I'm always coming back home, back to that simple life we found in that little itty bitty East Tennessee town. Tennessee town. I left my mountains chasing this dream. Now I can't believe all the things I've done and seen. But all I want to do is watch the sun go down in this little itty bitty East Tennessee town. No matter where I go, I'm always coming back home, where friends and kinfolk all gather round, in that little itty bitty East Tennessee town. Tennessee town. I was born in the shadow of a red oak tree. Nobody in the world was expecting me. And one day they'll lay me in the ground, in that little itty bitty East Tennessee town. No matter where I go, I'm always coming back home, back to that simple life we found, in that little itty bitty East Tennessee town. Tennessee town. My Tennessee town. Tennessee. Thank you all so much for listening. And again, congratulations to this year's inductees into the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame.
Congratulations to all of this year's Writers Hall of Fame inductees, and thanks to all the talented writers who shared their work with us this very evening. We also appreciate our amazing and generous sponsors who made this very event possible. And thanks to all of you for being a part of this wonderful celebration of writing. We'll be back live again next year in person, and we look forward to seeing you then. If I have time, I'd like to play a song I wrote about my dog. It's only 25 minutes. It's kind of like an epic poem, kind of like a Homer's Odyssey. No? Not next year? Not next year? Okay, we'll skip the song for now. Have a great evening.